Good afternoon, everybody. Let's start our next session. My name is Liena Ansone. I'm from Ministry of Agriculture from Latvia, and I will chair this next session. And we have three very good speakers and very good presentation, very interesting presentations. And from first of our speaker is Erika O'Nielsen, an environmental communicator from Swedish University of Agriculture and Science. And she's a human-animal study researcher working with changing interspecies relation in modernity and their practical manifestation in leisure, tourism, wildlife management. Very interesting. Please, Erika, floor is yours.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm having a great time so far. The presentations are all really nice. I had a look at the list, and I think I may be one of the only social scientists speaking here, so please bear with me. When we speak of wild animal welfare, it's imperative to me to discuss hunting, because hunters and hunting is arguably an arena in which human-wildlife interactions are most lived out in society. And as far as there being different groups in society who are like more or less close to wildlife, hunters like to wear their close connection to wildlife like a badge of honor. Are there any hunters here today? Yeah, well, like 5 or 6, cool. And that close connection frequently forms the basis also for sometimes criticizing the way that other groups in society try to tell hunters how to act and relate to and manage wildlife. So they'll be going, well, these are essentially the observations and criticisms from spectators of wildlife only. There's a word for this in Sweden, and it's called balcony biologist. Hunters think that when people interfere with wildlife and their relations with wildlife who don't actually engage with them, they are being balcony biologists. Hunters, of course, engage with wildlife in the direct corporeal sense, but in order to show that they are responsible users of nature, that they're not just wanton killers, hunters have to show that they not only obey the formal law system of rules, but they also have a quite intricate normative system of do's and don'ts and ethics. And that is essentially what I'm talking about today and what my research is on. Hunting ethics are definitely a self-preservationist thing. I mean, there are many reasons for having hunting ethics, but one of them surely is the fact that hunters need to show the rest of non-hunting society that they have their ducks in a row, that they're able to engage with wildlife on ethical, moral terms. Now, hunting ethics are a complex system of rights and wrongs and taboos and do's and don'ts when it comes to hunter-wildlife interactions. So it extends to stuff like what to shoot, when to shoot, how to shoot it, but also stuff like how do we talk about wildlife, how do we pose with it in pictures, how to not hunt on Sundays, or what to wear. It's a very intricate, dense system, and it continuously is changing as well. Now, most of hunting ethics is not formalized in the written down sense. Some of it can be, like if you look at the paragraph 27 of the Swedish hunting legislation, says to not inflict unnecessary harm. But for the most part, it's informal. And that makes it pretty elusive, hard to get to, and also difficult to hold hunters accountable to. It's also a little all over the place. I think hunters would be the first to admit this. It's not a system of ethic that departs clearly and consistently from one moral theory. It's kind of cobbled together from various different moral principles. Some utilitarianism in there, there's some natural law, there's even some care ethic and ecofeminism, which I find interesting. So in the North Germanic words for wildlife management, you'd often find terms like wildlife care and wildlife nurture. In Swedish we say viltvård when we talk about wildlife management, which is a kind of nursing, caring relation. So that's also quite interesting. To further complicate things, hunting ethics today are rapidly modernizing, so they're changing all the time. And hunting is no longer so self-contained. It's not just a man, a gun, and his dog. He's all the time acted on by outside pressures. And this is what my PhD and I are looking at in our project on hunting ethics. So are there new technology that change the way that hunters kill relate to wildlife? Are there new types of hunters coming in to hunt, which have a different sort of relation to wildlife? Now, I don't have time, actually, to go in on the change processes here themselves, but I'd like to present the idea that hunting ethics actually operates on 3 different levels, and that they can be destabilized and conflict between these 3 different levels. And luckily, several people here in the last session have preempted me a little bit, especially with a Osvalderplassen talk as well. And the first level that I'd like to present here that hunters relate to is the biocentric. Pretty straightforward. That refers to honoring the welfare of individual organisms. It's about minimizing suffering, ensuring swift, clean kills. And at its most stripped down form, you could say that the biocentric level of ethics really has no art to it. It's just about putting the animal out of its misery or killing the animal in whatever means is most effective and humane. To be provocative, you could say that if hunters were to purely adhere to this level, they might as well be clinical slaughterers using a bolt gun to put animals out of their lives. Perhaps even using some of that anti-anxiety medication that Åsa was talking about, like having that before the kill even. But that's not really how most people hunt today. On a critical note, a hunting scholar called Ted Carasotti once said that hunters who like to flash their biocentric credentials, who like to think that they are very honorable in this dimension by, for example, ending the suffering of animals and preventing excess populations of animals so that they won't have to starve or be killed by intra-species predation or something like that. They are making themselves out to be Florence Nightingales with rifles, selflessly putting animals out of their misery. The second level, ecocentric, and that refers, of course, to the well-being of biotic aggregates. So the ecosystem, the population level, the species level. And here, one's not really so concerned with the welfare of the individual organism, right? So the individual organism can actually be sacrificed to benefit the whole. And that's the kind of ethic that will allow a lot of hunters who go trophy hunting in Namibia, in Africa, to say, I'm okay, I'm shooting this rhino, this endangered rhino. I pay a premium to do so, several hundreds of thousands of Swedish krona, whatever they would be, because the revenue for that hunt will actually go in large part toward the conservation of rhino in the wild. So I'm having a kind of ecocentric rationale there. One individual can be sacrificed. And that's actually been criticized, though, by these biocentrists, saying that's eco-fascist, allowing the sacrifice of an individual to benefit the greater good. Like, what is even the greater good? The third level, the final level, is anthropocentric. And that refers mainly to norms of right and wrong and ideals of propriety in hunting that have to do with respecting hunting as a sport or a tradition. So it's about honoring the essence of hunting. So it's about respecting the property rights of other landowners and hunters. It's about respecting the safety of other humans in the forest, perhaps. There's also a strong aesthetic component to the anthropocentric ethic here. It's about enacting ethics of restraints. So you don't just go in and pump out a drone strike on an animal. You actually want to use some skill. You want to exercise your sportsman skills intellectually and physically. Just as you don't walk up in football to deliver the football inside the goalpost with your hands, you actually value the sport of it a little bit more. So you enact these restraints or these fair chase type ethics. My point is to say that each of these ethic levels operates with a different moral subject in mind. So it's the individual organism, it's the biotic aggregate, and it's the human hunter, or the humans, simply put. Now, remarkably, these three levels, as Lotta said, tend to layer up quite nicely in practice. So what is ecocentrically good is often what is biocentrically good as well. There are loads of examples, but we could take shooting a rabid fox, for example. That's obviously going to be something that is putting an individual out of its misery, and so is biocentrically valuable. It also rids the population of a disease-ridden individual. And anthropocentrically, it's going to be inoffensive as well if they don't really shoot it in a very strange way. But I imagine this is a standard hunt with a rifle and you exercise some skills. But there are situations in which these ethics conflict, and they are really interesting to me because I want to know what hunters go for in the case of a moral dilemma. Say you have a situation in which you've potentially maimed an animal during a hunt. You're not sure, but you think you've actually wounded it, and it bolts and it cuts across to your neighbor's land. Now, the polite thing to do here from an anthropocentric point of view would probably be to confer with the landowner in some capacity. Is it okay if I go into your land? What sort of arrangement do we have? Can I release my dogs on your land? Is it my game now? Is it your game, etc.? Again, you're not sure if you hit it or not. The biocentric ethic, of course, on the other hand, dictates that I just do the most humane thing for the animal, which is to go in, disrespect property boundaries, and just put this animal out of its misery. So what do we do in cases like that? Do I wait? Do I establish contact with the landowner, etc.? Some of my interviews with hunters have pointed to the fact that most today would choose the biocentric option. This is what they tell me. And they value this above all others. But they also note that this is a quite recent thing, and that in the old days, it wasn't like this at all, even just a few decades ago. Then neighbors were very territorial, and you did not want to rub yourself the wrong way with your landowning neighbors. And so there's a lot more sort of petty jealousy and so on, and what's been called possessive individualism over the way we manage animals. So that's a calculus that's sort of changing. Other examples that pit the ethics against one another, we take ecocentric and biocentric. I thought wildlife feeding is a good example that we've come up with here today. That might be good for the individual animal, right? I'm sure it would prefer not to starve to death in winter. But on a longer term, holistic population level, is the implications of feeding very positive? Does it maybe increase disease risk or dependence or conflict between the species or whatever? Also, feeding and baiting wildlife, it's not sure that that is anthropocentrically a good thing to do. Is it sportsmanlike to bait animals, to kind of get them to go in the directions you want? It certainly seems to be okay with wild boar. That's a way in which you hunt wild boar, you bait them. But it would never be done with moose, for example. So it's anthropocentrically contentious as well, this whole feeding of wildlife. Do we really just domesticate wildlife? Is it still hunting in that case? Yeah. I just want to have some concluding remarks here. And there are a few points of caution, I suppose, to hunters who are concerned with ethics, especially the hunting lobby, for whom this is a big concern today. How do our hunters hunt? How do our members present hunting? But also more broadly to veterinarians, ethologists, and all of you here today. And the first point is that which is biocentrically valuable will automatically also be ecocentrically valuable and anthropocentrically a good thing. That is known as the kind of convergence hypothesis in environmental ethics. It's said that although we might depart from different moral subjects, we have different rationales for wanting something, we all kind of want the same thing at the end of the day. So it all converges. And I want to just point out the fact that no, it doesn't always do that. Not all roads lead to Rome. And if we say that Rome in this case is individual animal welfare, which is probably the focus here today, especially when you have an ethic that's cobbled together from various moral philosophies, like the hunting ethics are. There will be moral dilemmas. It's not always obvious that you will choose the welfare right option. The second point is that we have this new force, or not new, but it's a very palpable force that affects the way we hunt and hunting ethics, and that is the commodification of hunting. So when you pay a premium to go hunting, you pay for the pleasure. You might get out very seldom, just a couple of times a year because it's so expensive and all that. Do I maybe have a different ethic when I hunt? Do I want to maximize my investment, perhaps get my money's worth? More broadly, if I pay for a hunting trip abroad, if I become a hunting tourist, we could also ask the question, does that change behavior of the hunter? This whole when in Rome effect, that I might be less restrained by the types of norms and high ethics that I might otherwise uphold when I hunt home in my own land. Will I hunt in a different way if I do it elsewhere? And my final point is that I'd want to kind of problematize my own division of these three levels, the biocentric, the ecocentric, and anthropocentric. I want to say that maybe a more accurate reflection of the way that hunters relate to wildlife, maybe even a normative direction in the sense of this is how hunters should relate to wildlife, is the idea of relational animal ethics. And that is essentially that what we owe to wildlife and the rights that they have are subject to the different relationships that we've entered into with them, both on a personal and societal level. So we have a certain relationship with a species that we've extirpated, for example, a certain relationship with a species that is on our own land. We have a kind of connection and responsibility for them. And I'll leave that in the air and perhaps get to return to it during the panel session, because this is an ethical perspective that has broad relevance, like beyond the hunting context in particular. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Erika. You touch very, very interesting points, and I believe that there are many questions, and I already see some of them. But of course, we will have after this session, we will have a panel, and don't worry, we will have time for more questions, and Erika will be there. But yes, David, please.
Yes, thank you very much. I got my British hat on, but for us, hunting really means chasing the animal. And I think maybe what we're talking about here is more stalking. And with chasing the animal, the outcome isn't, the desired outcome isn't necessarily the death of the target animal, but the chase itself. So it's reducing suffering, and suffering is part of it. And that seems to me to have a different kind of ethical paradigm. Could you comment on that?
Yeah, I think there are certainly aspects of that kind of chase for chase's own sake that is also in other European hunting cultures. We probably have aspects of it in just fox hunting here, for example. It's not the end goal so much as the process leading up to it. But I think that definitely shows quite strong bias in terms of anthropocentrism, because you are putting all of it on the sports dimension, on the aesthetics and the kind of what's the name? It's a hedonistic kind of desire. So it's absolutely it's an interesting one. Makes me think also of catch and release fishing, the way you don't end up using the product of that activity at all. You really want the fight, and that's it. And yeah, how ethical is that? I don't know.
Yeah, thank you. Any question here? Yes, please.
Hello. I would like to know your opinion on the ethics and morality of using dogs for hunting.
Ooh, I'm in the right part of the world to say that, I think. We do like our hunting dogs in Scandinavia, and it's not at all like a controversial chapter, I don't think. Whereas I just read these American articles, and it's like, oh, hunting with dogs is the worst thing you can do next to poaching and stuff. So it's very, it's a divisive kind of thing across the world. in the US, they would say that, that actually is a form of cheating if you use dogs. The dogs do all the work. But here it's not like that. And I think that there's probably a quite responsible use of hunting dogs in Scandinavia. Maybe not in all chapters, maybe not in bear hunting, but overall we don't release packs of dogs to directly engage with the animal. We just kind of use them for a flushing out purpose. And there's not supposed to be any contact between the dog and the animal, I suppose.
Okay, here is, I think, from our watchers, video watchers.
Question from the video stream audience. Erika, can you see a change in hunting ethics as more women begin to hunt?
Great question. I think so. I think there's when these types of modern developments or demographics enter hunting, sometimes you can see a backlash happen. So hunting will become more masculine, more emphasized as a frontier for masculinity and macho-ness. On the other hand, you can see also increased influences of care and nurture. Just in terms of dog use, people really emphasize not so much the kill, but collaborating with the dogs. I think that's a survey says that's a female thing that they've brought in a bit more, and maybe taking some focus off technology potentially, because it seems like the real gearheads, the real tech heads are males in hunting, from my experience. So that perhaps shifts as well.
Okay, thank you, Erika, and please keep your questions to panel session. We will have time to discuss this issue and to have discussions deeper about those issues. Thank you again, Erika.